So, a couple months ago I did a tip video about training your senses. All of your senses can be used and utilized in observation for deduction. So I had engineered several exercises that you can use for improving your senses. But I've also come to the realization that it's important to kind of understand where you are with your senses. And so this is kind of a follow-up video to that one, and I'll link that one below, and I'll have these two kind of run together. So after you've done training with your senses from that video, it's a good idea to know exactly where your senses are, where you can rely on your senses. Because it doesn't matter how much you train your senses, there is a human limit that you can get to. And it's a good idea to understand where your personal limit is on that, in that range. So I've devised several ways to kind of test your senses to help you figure out where you are in that, and then you can learn to understand, and that way you don't overexert yourself in your senses. So one of the easiest ones for me was hearing. If you can find a humming noise or a consistent noise that will be consistent, and then you find an area that has other background noise going on through it, so maybe a restaurant or a city square, something like that. You hone in on that constant hum while you're close to it, and then you gradually distance yourself from that hum, and you pay attention to it until you can't hear it anymore. And then you kind of have an idea what range your hearing can be trusted in. Something similar can be done with sight, and you can practice in different lightings. So if you have a sign outside or a card, you can set it up in your room, or if you're outside, whatever the case may be, and then you continue to distance yourself from it until you can't read it anymore. And you can do that in different lighting, different, if it's bright outside, if there's something in your eye, if there's something obstructing your view. So there's several ways that you can test it, and then again, you have an idea of where your sense of sight can be trusted. Sense of smell and sense of taste are very similar. In the brain, they're kind of wired in similar locations. That's why a lot of people can smell tastes and taste smells, etc. There's actually a term for that, where your wiring gets cross-wired, but as far as smell and taste, it's already connected in the brain around the same area. So you would train those in very similar ways. In these instances, there is something called the flavor wheel. You can look that up on the internet. They use it a lot in wine and alcohol tasting. They use it in alcohol. I already said alcohol. In coffee tasting. That's why I know of it, because I'm a barista. So I've messed around with light right in my eye. So I've played around with the flavor wheel. And I'll put a link to a flavor wheel in the description. This is irritating. So you'll have that to run with. But what you do is basically, with a clean palate, so you use water to clean your palate, you would try to identify the different flavor notes that you're tasting or smelling. And the more attention you pay to those notes, the more your sense of taste will kind of evolve, and you'll understand flavors a lot more delicately. I also encourage, if you're very serious about this, to cut back on sugars, because that kind of blinds your sense of taste. And just try different foods too. Try different foods, expose yourself to different smells, and these kind of open up your senses to recognize and understand new smells, new tastes. And then the final sense is your sense of touch. Of course, there are other senses. There's somewhere around 30 different senses, I think, but the basic 5 senses is what we're talking about here. How you would test your sense of touch is mostly just, again, with the blindfolding tricks that I mentioned in the other one. Eventually you'll just improve to the point that you can feel nuances and things like that. And there are deduction practices that you can do with just your hands. There's a mentalism trick where you would be blindfolded and you observe an item with your hands, and that gives you an idea about the person. There's not really a way to test your sense of touch, at least not a way that I've devised, but just practicing it constantly, you should notice consistent improvement in your sense of touch. Anyway, that's the tip video for today. I do have plenty more content on the way, so don't worry about that. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.